Chronos make the best Rolex homages. Changed my mind. Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. You probably won't change my mind, by the way. I think I have reviewed pretty much every Rolex homage on the market, from Junot and Devosa at the top end through Steinhart, Squale down to Phoebus, Tissot and Saint Martin, finishing with Loriot, Guanchin and Pagani. And I reckon Chronos hits the sweet spot in terms of the quality of the watch that you get for the dollar value that you pay. Welcome, by the way, to another installment in the John Was Saved series. It was never meant to be a series, but I guess it has become one. As Rolex grey market prices continue to go up and up and up, the gap between an original and a homage has risen to almost stratospheric levels. $69,000, that's what they want for one of those 41mm Tiffany Paganis. I can't save you that much today, but I can save you $48,500 by opting for this Chronos Pepsi GMT rather than the Rolex Pepsi GMT. Remember the Rolex Pepsi GMT? Remember a couple of years ago that was the hottest Rolex you could buy and it was trading for twice retail? Not anymore. Here we are in 2022 and it is trading for 3.5 times the retail, $49,000 Australian. That's 36,000 US dollars. I can think of a lot of things I would rather spend 36,000 US dollars on rather than one time telling device. They're not all that expensive. Here's one at 45,000 Australian, but it is a used example, of course. Utter madness. Anyway, you saw the pop-up. This video is sponsored by the Chronos official store on AliExpress. They sent me this watch. I do not have to send it back. I will obviously leave a link to their store in the description of the video if you fancy one of these or any of their other excellent, if not particularly original watches. These are normally around 360 US dollars. During the current AliExpress sale, they're about 325. You can get them scraping under 300, but I went for the one with the fully loomed ceramic bezel insert. Something you don't get with a real Rolex, even if you spend 49 grand on it. Let's flip the camera and have a look at the Chronos. Alright, packaging, like pretty much every watch on AliExpress these days, it comes in one of these little plastic tubs, which is fine. We don't give out prizes for the packaging. Inside though, we definitely give out prizes for the watch. And that is a good looking watch. Comes with a proper signed, stamp dated warranty card too. Was that what you were expecting? Yeah, it looks a lot like a Rolex Pepsi GMT Master 2, but costs $48,500 less than a Rolex Pepsi GMT Master 2. These Chronos and similar watches really do make a mockery of the prices that people are currently paying for Rolex. Hey, if you want to spend 50 grand on a watch that is worth 50 grand only because somebody's prepared to pay 50 grand for it, then go for it, but it is just bonkers if you ask me. So being a GMT Master 2 homage, it is based on the GMT Master 2 case, which is still the slightly smaller 40mm super case. So 40mm in diameter, 12.6mm thick, just under 48 lug to lug. I measure it at 47.7. 20mm lug width. There's a nice taper on this Jubilee down to 15.3, back up to 17.5 for the clasp. Sized up for my 7-inch wrist, yeah, I could take another half link out here if I wanted to, but I don't. I like to wear this one a bit loose because it's on the Jubilee. It's a little bit lighter than I would have expected it. It weighs in at 138 grams. I suspect that is because the clasp is slightly smaller and because of that Jubilee bracelet. 316L stainless steel case crown bezel, full stainless bracelet. Screw links, now you will need a 1mm screwdriver if you are in for one of these because it has those tiny screws, solid end links, and it is a milled clasp. The clasp will be on the moans and niggles section today, I will tell you that already. It does have that easy link flip-flop and 3 holes of internal adjustment, but there's nothing easy about that internal adjustment, unfortunately. Case finish is very pleasant, just what you'd expect, so much better than the old Squale 1545s, which were just dog rough by comparison. High polished sides, brushing to the upper lug surface. Nice transition between the two, exactly like the GMT Master 2. Now it's a kind of semi-guarded crown here, screwed down with the Chronos logo and 200 meters of water resistance, which is twice what Rolex give you. Machining on the bezel is sharp with a brushed lower surface and a high polish upper surface where that ceramic bezel insert nestles. And because it's a GMT, it has a 24-click bi-directional rotating GMT bezel. So you set the GMT hand and then you can adjust the second time zone should you require. By adjusting the bezel, there is a touch of wobble, but I'm not going to criticize the Chronos too much because both of the GMT Master 2s, the current generations that I have reviewed, have both had a little bit of bezel wobble. Overall, the action is pretty stout. Cyclops is well applied, it's in the right place. My new camera really doesn't do Cyclopses any favors. This one actually not too bad at all. The 5-link Jubilee is a good one. Brushed outer edges, high polish to those 3 center links. I love a Jubilee. That flex, those extra links just give you so much comfort on wrist. I will talk more specifically about the clasp later on. It's okay in terms of the way it is manufactured. Looks a little sterile though. I could have done with the Chronos logo somewhere on it just to make it look less like an off-the-shelf part. Now the sterile Rolex style caseback is supposed to look like an off-the-shelf part. It's also not that interesting, so I'm not going to be here forever. Nice end link fitment, no rattle from these, and high quality spring bars. Now because this is now my watch, because it's not a loaner, I'm going to do something I don't do very often. I'm going to crack that case back and have a look at this movement. And the reason I want to crack the back on this watch is because I have not encountered this movement before. It's a Hangzhou 6460. Based on an ETA 2836-2 with a GMT module added on top, apparently. So it's a Chinese clone of a Swiss movement that has a pretty good reputation. They've been making these for over a decade now. They're known to be far, far more reliable than the cheaper DG and Pearl GMT movements that power Parnas and Paganis, etc, etc. And it looks okay, pretty clean, no hairs, no dust. Metal movement holder, all nicely screwed together as well. Decoration, let's just say, good from afar, but far from good. I don't understand why these companies bother with that perlage because it does them no favours whatsoever. There is, however, the ubiquitous timing adjustment screw if you need to tweak the movement. But does this movement need tweaking? Let's find out. Let's put it on the time grapher. No, this does not need adjusting at all. That is remarkable. Running pretty much spot on and looking very healthy. And as you see there, 28,800 vibrations per hour. A high beat auto, $300, running that close to zero. Fantastic. But moving from the back of the watch to the front of the watch, and this all looks rather familiar, doesn't it? It has that classic Rolex-alike layout. Big triangle at 12, batons at 6 and 9, magnified date complication at the 3 o'clock, circular applied indices everywhere else. Printed minute track around the outer edge. Now, Chronos logo is applied here in silver. More on that later. I think they've gone through a couple of revisions where it was printed and they had the hourglass that features on the crown there as well. I personally would have preferred if they had retained a printed logo just like Rolex does. Anyway, beneath the pinion, GMT in red, automatic and 200 meters, 660 feet in an inoffensive font. The handset is of course pure Rolex with that Mercedes hour hand, but they are beveled down the middle and lume filled, as you will see in just a second. But the 3 reds they've used, the bezel insert, the GMT hand and the GMT printing on the dial, don't quite match each other. The bezel though is really very nice. There are cheap bicolor bezels and then there are more expensive bicolor bezels, and this is definitely one of the more expensive ones. However, the triangle at 12 isn't actually a triangle. There's a bit of a curve to that top edge if you notice. But the lume is fantastic. BGW9 and just a ton of it all over the hands, the indices and that lume ceramic bezel insert. This has got me thinking I'm going to do a Lume Wars AliExpress only and put some of these AliExpress dive watches head to head. Chronos, San Martin, Steel Dive, etc. I think it'll be really interesting to see just how good the lume is on some of these watches considering how little you're spending. Even at the end of the 20 minutes with this one, it is still glowing like a torch. I've been wearing it at night as a consequence. And on wrist, it wears a treat, pretty much my optimal size, shape, weight. Everything about this one is just made for me. I was fortunate enough to try on a Pepsi GMT a couple of years ago. Mr. X used to have one. He sold it though to start his business. He liquidated a bit of his collection when he started his business a couple of years ago, but yeah, it was every bit as fantastic on wrist as I was hoping it would be, and this Chronos, being a faithful homage, is every bit as comfortable as the real deal. Overhead legibility is pretty good, and you can see that bezel looks excellent under my studio lights. Not sure how much AR coating there is underneath that sapphire crystal, but then again, Rolex don't bother putting it on their GMTs, so I won't complain too much if Chronos don't either. Outside natural light, everything looks good, nice colour from that two-tone bezel, although you can see some bounce back, some glare from the flat sapphire crystal depending on which angle I hold it at. On wrist though, it is just glorious. It's a good Jubilee. All Jubilees are good Jubilees as far as I'm concerned, but it's a nice Jubilee. 12.6mm thick, fairly flat case, but not thick, so it does wear well on me. And if it wears well on me, chances are it's going to wear well on you. And the pocket shot to finish, no glide lock mechanism in this clasp or on the original Rolex, so you've got a choice of wearing it either slightly too tight or slightly too loose, depending on how you adjust it. More on that in just a second. Alright then, moans and niggles. If I was being properly pernickety, I would complain about the GMT. Because it's ETA based, it's a traveller's GMT, meaning you can move that back 1 hour at a time, but it's not properly slaved to the hour hand, so it's not a true GMT. But you're not really going to get a true GMT for this price, are you? So again, I'm not going to give it too hard a time for that. Branding, Chronos, I'm not a big fan of that applied silver logo. Looks okay when it catches the light, but too often it's missing in action. It kind of disappears. I can't help but think they would have been better sticking with the painted white one from a couple of generations back. And then there's the clasp. Look, I'm pretty handy with the Bergeron these days, but this one is still a pain in the ass to adjust. 3 holes as shown, but to adjust it, you have to open that flip-flop system, then get a thin spring bar adjustment tool. I've got a Bergeron 6767 right in there, and even then it is a proper footer. Okay, I get it, it keeps that Rolex look, but I can't help but think it would be better with a slightly bigger glide lock if they wanted to do that, or a different adjustment system altogether. And then of course there's the whole homage thing, but if you're this deep into the video, I guess you're okay with the whole homage thing. Zero originality, and if you ever encounter somebody who has paid 48.5 grand for a Rolex Pepsi GMT, there could be an awkward conversation in there. But when the Rolex bubble bursts, and believe me, it will burst at some stage, that conversation could have a slightly different tone again, could it not? If somebody has paid 49 grand for the original on the grey market. So in sum, if you love the Rolex GMT but will never be able to afford one or never want to pay the inflated prices for one, and you're okay with wearing a virtual one-for-one copy, this Chronos is as good as it gets. And you're unlikely to change my mind about that. So there you have it, the Chronos GMT, zero originality, and you're gonna have to be okay with that. Still not sure about the applied brand name on the dial either. Apart from that though, it's very, very well done and super versatile for just over $300. If you're interested in more Chronos, why not check out my top 10 Submariner homages video or the straight up review that I did last year. Thanks for watching, see you soon.